Heather Boushey is a member of President Biden's Council of Economic Advisors. She was previously CEO of the Washington Center for Equitable Growth. Heather, thanks so much for your time on this Tuesday. As we just heard, President Biden's going to be visiting a small business today in Pennsylvania, stopped at one in D.C. just last week. What's the specific pitch, Heather, to these businesses about the plan?
Well, small businesses are the lifeblood of so many communities, and yet we know how hard they've been hit during this pandemic. Both, the fact that the virus has been, out of control for so long and we're wrapping our hands around it now, but that's been really hard on all these businesses that have had to weather this storm. So, the American Rescue Plan includes more funding for small businesses. Importantly, it includes money for restaurants. About 60% of businesses in the hospitality sector are small businesses. And those restaurants we know have been so hard hit, and yet they're the lifeblood of our community. They're where people go to gather and, hang out with friends. And as people are getting the vaccine, as things can start opening up again and it's safer, making sure that those restaurants can come back, that they have the resources they need, along with all the different kinds of small businesses, is just such an important priority for the president. And that's why he's focused on it today.
There's a certain word that we've heard from top congressional Republicans to describe the rescue plan, and Democrats for that matter. I want to play that for you.
Progressive means socialism. Socialism, socialism, socialist.
Socialism.
Socialism. That seems to be one of the main attacks out there, and an example of the branding attempts that the White House will be facing here. How do you counter that branding that Republicans are trying to make stick, Heather?
Well, I think that, what we've seen the president focused on first and foremost is that we need the government to be effective in being able to contain a national crisis like this pandemic. And, now that he is, in office and is getting those shots in arms and making sure that people have that protective gear and making sure that communities have the resources that they need to reopen safely, all the money that's going to go out to schools so that kids can go back to school and parents can go back to work. This is all an important part of what the president's vision and commitment is. And, we know that this pandemic has been so much harder on folks at the bottom end of the wage distribution. It's been harder on those essential workers who put their lives on the line and yet haven't been earning the kinds of wages that they should, or, perhaps with the right to join a union. And the president is focused on making sure that the rescue plan is targeted at those who need it most, and targeted at the folks that have been the hardest hit. So, I think that the president really stands by his commitment to making sure that we build back this economy, and of course that we build back better for everyone all across America.
Let's look ahead here, because as you know, Bloomberg is reporting that President Biden is considering what would be the first major federal tax hike since 1993 to help pay for his next economic program. This reportedly designed as a follow-up to the relief plan that was just passed and signed. What more can you tell us about that plan?
Well, one thing I could tell you is that the second half of the 1990s were years that were actually quite good for working Americans. It was a period when we actually saw inequality close and wages rise across the bottom half of the wage distribution. So I start there because, we've told ourselves these stories that tax cuts are necessarily going to thwart growth, but that's not what we saw in the 1990s. The president has been very, very clear time and time again that his goal is to make sure that those at the top, especially those who've been able to make it through the past year relatively unscathed, that he's going to focus his tax increases on people who make over $400,000 a year so that the things that our society and our communities need, we have the resources to invest in. So, the details are yet still to be determined, but his values are very clear.
Heather, wealthy individuals, that's reportedly one part of the proposal. The other part, companies in this country. Help us understand how raising taxes on companies in this country, many of which are still struggling, some of them mightily because of the pandemic. How does raising taxes on them help the economy?
Well, one thing about taxes, especially on companies, is that they're paid on what companies' profits are. So when we're talking about taxes, we have to remember that, if a company's struggling and they're laying off workers and they're not making any money, then by definition, they're not going to be paying much in taxes either. But we have to be thinking about the bigger picture here. We need to make sure that we connect the dots between the needs of the American people, making sure that we have fiscal sustainability, and that we have a tax system that is fair and just, but that makes sure that we have the revenue that we need to do the things that government needs to do.
Let's talk about the average family here, because we know that on top of the $1,400 payments, there's also an increase in the child tax credit as well. How are we planning to make sure families understand what's in that for them?
Well, new shows like yours, Craig. I mean, this is the way we communicate with people, helping folks understand that, help is on the way, the checks are on the way. The president said yesterday that there'll be 100 million checks out in the next, few days, along with 100 million vaccines. It's important that people understand that these benefits are coming to them, that, folks will get checks if they file taxes, over the past couple of years, and that, that in order to get the child tax credit, again, filing taxes is key to that, but making sure that people understand that these resources are available to them, and that this is because we know that families all across our economy and our society need these supports because this pandemic has been so challenging.
Heather, really quickly, and not to get too in the weeds here, but with regards to the child tax credit specifically, there's been some talk that this alone could put a significant dent in child poverty in this country. But you correct me if I'm wrong, isn't the reality that this would be a temporary extension, and the only way you actually truly affect, substantively at least, child poverty in this country, it would be by making that permanent, no?
Well, I think you raise a really important question. Let me say that the research is clear that, if we can cut child poverty in half in 2021, that is certainly going to help millions of children and their families, and that could make a lifelong difference for them. So that is in and of itself very important. I think time will tell, whether or not this policy is made permanent. But what I can tell you is that the extent to which we can help people in the here and now and show the power of what this administration can do, I think that will really help people understand the importance of something like the American Rescue Plan.
Heather Boushey, we'll have to leave it there. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.